To some degree, I think we've got to remember what makes up the ASX. It is 60 odd percent banks and miners. And so if you think about where the iron ore price has been, as you were just talking about, there is a very real reality of the index or the market. I use that in implied italics, is really not necessarily every company on the exchange. So I got to say, when your banks are elevated, when the miners are falling, it is really worth. I mean, if you own an ETF or you're invested across the market, then of course it matters. But for those of us who are looking to pick stocks or to at least make some sort of kind of value-based calls on the companies on the exchange, if you back those guys out, I'm not so sure that you should be too worried. There's been some falls this month, as you say. The market's been nervous, and to some degree, when the market falls, everything falls. But if you unpick that, I really do think there's some attractive opportunities amongst what's left. In terms of the rest of the month, look, I think we're going to have some nerves. We're really looking forward to the rollback of lockdown restrictions. Of course, some come into play in New South Wales this morning for a small part of Sydney, but over time, we're hoping by the end of October, most, if not all of those, will roll back in New South Wales, a large chunk in Victoria as well. Now, the health implications are always more important than the stock market ones, but as we get that rollback, as the community gets more vaccinated, I do expect we will see some more optimism among investors who can look out now without that uncertainty kind of clouding things and really see what's coming down the pike. And that should, I hope, be good news.
So, Scott, you're saying you wouldn't be buying the index at this point. You need to target where you're buying with specific companies.
Thank you for putting it much more succinctly than I did. Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, I'm a big fan of ETFs in general. I would love to recommend people buy the ASX 200 or 300, generally speaking, but I have to say, given that over reliance on those two industries, even if you love those industries, being 60% invested in just two sectors of the market is way over the top. Now, it does represent the ASX 200 or 300, so it's not an unreasonable decision in terms of replicating the index. But I'm always a little bit cautious on the Australian market in particular, less so around the world. If you buy a global ETF or a US ETF, I would do that happily and with abandon. And of course, if you're dollar cost averaging, I don't want to scare anyone out of continuing to do that on the ASX either, by the way. So if you've been putting money away every week, month, fortnight, whatever, for the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, keep doing that for sure. But if you're looking to make a bet right now on an index or on a particular investment, it wouldn't be the ASX 300 or 200 for me.
All right, fair enough. Okay, Scott, let's get a little more specific then to your buy, hold and sell. You're going to start with Aussie Broadband. Now, this is interesting because the stock has done really well over the past 12 months or so. So I'm intrigued as to why you think this is worthwhile buying at this point. It has, it's just completed an institutional placement. Now it's offered that to shareholders.
Yep. Yeah, look, it's a really good company. It's one of those businesses, I've probably talked about in ausbiz before, I think, where you look at an industry or a sector and say, hang on, how boring, how mundane, how slow growing is telcos? NBN in particular, telco in general, so much hard work just to keep afloat. We've seen Telstra over the last 5 years. Now they've announced their T25 strategy. They're hoping for growth themselves. But over that long period of time, it's just been it's like running through a treacle, really, really tough slog. But if you're a new, small, nimble business like Aussie Broadband that has a phenomenal amount of customer love. I've used this anecdote before, but I'm with Telstra at home. I complained about it on Twitter just because I like to do these things. And I got maybe 6 or 7 each time I do it. People saying, hey, have you tried Aussie Broadband? You should really try it. It's fantastic. I don't remember the last time I had a telco company recommended to me with such gusto. So the reality is they're doing something really right by their customers, or their customers just perceiving it as better. Either way, it doesn't make any difference, right? As long as more people like it, more people are signing up. And when you're the little guy doing a bit of disruptive stuff around the edges, there's a lot of growth you can find before you become big enough that the system kind of stagnation catches up with you. So I think Aussie Broadband's got probably 3 to 5 years worth of meaningful above market growth to go. Yes, the share price has been up and up nicely, so that's always good for those who've held it for a while. We did recommend it a little while ago to our members, so they've got some of that, not the whole lot. But I think there's much more to come. If you think about the work they're doing now, they're signing up more customers. They're white labeling their service. They're going into the backhaul and infrastructure business, basically trying to cut out the margin they're paying to Telstra and others. So they're kind of setting themselves up for growth. And I think that's going to continue for a long time to come, as long as they keep delighting their customers the way they are. It's a reminder, too, for investors that if you're old and big and stodgy, that's a fantastic competitive advantage in terms of having a moat, right? Very, very hard to knock Telstra off its perch. But if you do manage to do that, or at least get some critical mass, all of a sudden that stodginess becomes a millstone around your neck. And the nimbleness of being the new guy, yes, it's tough to get over, or get escape velocity, as I like to say, get over that wall the first time. All of a sudden, it's much, much easier, right? The business model's proven out. You've got some momentum. Your business is growing, and your customers love you. It's a really nice way to go. And I think Aussie Broadband will keep gaining market share in this market for years.